If you open that door again, he'll keep breaking pieces of you until there's nothing left. The words stopped Olivia Parker cold in the middle of the dim apartment hallway. Rain hammered against the old Brooklyn windows, while the flickering ceiling light buzzed overhead like it might die at any second. Her fingers tightened around the handle of her tiny blue suitcase. Behind her, the apartment door slammed hard enough to rattle the walls. Silence followed. Heavy. Humiliating. Olivia stared down at the cracked floor tiles, trying not to cry in front of the stranger standing barefoot across from her. Ethan Cole leaned against the doorway of apartment 14B, gray sweatpants low on his hips, dark hoodie wrinkled like he had been sleeping. She had lived across from him for almost 6 months, yet she barely knew anything about him. Quiet guy. Late-night coffee runs. Always polite. Always distant. Sometimes she heard piano music through the wall around midnight. Sometimes she caught him staring out at the city rooftop alone for hours. But tonight, for the first time, he looked directly at her. Really looked at her. His blue eyes moved to the fading bruise near her wrist before lifting back to her face. His jaw tightened slightly. "You okay?" he asked quietly. Olivia forced a small nod, even though her chest hurt too much to breathe normally. "I'm fine." Ethan glanced at the suitcase. "No, you're not." The honesty in his voice almost broke her. She looked away quickly, embarrassed by the tears gathering in her eyes. Outside, thunder rolled over the city. The old building shook softly beneath their feet. Olivia laughed once under her breath, shaky and tired. "I guess the universe picked a dramatic night to ruin my life." Ethan stared at her for a moment longer before stepping aside from the doorway. Warm light spilled from his apartment into the dark hallway. "Come inside," he said. "Just until the storm passes." Olivia hesitated. Every warning her mother ever gave her about strange men echoed in her head. But Ethan didn't feel dangerous. He felt lonely, like someone carrying pain quietly for so long he forgot what silence sounded like without it. She swallowed hard. "I don't want to be a problem." "You're not." Another flash of lightning lit the hallway white for half a second. Olivia jumped slightly. Ethan noticed. Without another word, he disappeared into his apartment and came back holding a dark green hoodie. "Here," he said softly. "You're freezing." She slipped it over her shoulders. It smelled faintly like coffee and cedarwood. Safe. Warm. Human. Her eyes stung unexpectedly. Ethan walked toward the kitchen while Olivia stepped cautiously inside. The apartment shocked her immediately. She expected clutter from a quiet man living alone in Brooklyn. Instead, everything looked sleek and expensive. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Manhattan, glowing silver in the rain. Black marble countertops reflected the city lights. A massive piano sat near the windows beside shelves filled with books and vinyl records. Olivia froze near the entrance. "Wait," she whispered. "How can you afford this place?" Ethan opened the refrigerator calmly. "Long story. You're not secretly a drug dealer, are you?" For the first time, a real smile appeared on his face. Quick. Small. Dangerous enough to make her heart skip once. "No," he handed her a mug of hot chocolate instead of coffee. "You look like someone who needs sugar." Olivia wrapped both hands around the mug, letting the warmth sink into her frozen fingers. She noticed an old cassette player sitting near the couch beside stacks of tapes labeled in neat handwriting. The sight made her blink. "You still use cassettes?" Ethan glanced toward it. Something softer crossed his expression. "Sometimes old things sound more honest." The words lingered in the room between them. Olivia looked down at the tape inside the player. Fleetwood Mac. Rumors. Her father used to play that album every Sunday morning before he died. "That was my dad's favorite too," she whispered before thinking. Ethan looked at her carefully. "Mine too." For a second, the city outside disappeared. No rain. No heartbreak. No loneliness. Just two strangers standing in warm apartment light, carrying memories they didn't know how to let go of. Then suddenly Ethan's phone buzzed violently across the marble counter. Olivia glanced at the screen accidentally, and her entire body went still. Breaking news. Cole Technologies CEO Ethan Cole missing after boardroom scandal. Olivia slowly lifted her eyes toward the quiet man standing in front of her kitchen island. The man she thought was just the lonely neighbor next door. Ethan saw the fear and confusion spreading across her face. He exhaled once, slow and tired, before reaching for the phone. "I was hoping you wouldn't see that tonight." Olivia stared at the glowing phone screen like it might suddenly change into something less impossible. Ethan Cole. The Ethan Cole. The billionaire whose face had been on magazine covers, business podcasts, and giant digital billboards across Manhattan. The youngest founder to ever build a tech company worth $12 billion before turning 34. Her throat tightened. Slowly, she looked back up at the quiet man standing barefoot in front of her kitchen island. Nothing about him matched the cold public image she remembered from interviews online. The man in those interviews wore perfect suits and expensive watches while reporters called him ruthless. But this Ethan looked exhausted. Human. Lonely. Rainwater still slid down the massive windows behind him while thunder rumbled over the city skyline. "You are Ethan Cole," Olivia whispered carefully, like saying the words too loudly might shatter the room. Ethan rubbed a hand over his jaw before nodding once. "Yeah." "The billionaire?" A tired smile crossed his face. Unfortunately, Olivia almost laughed from pure disbelief. Instead, she stepped backward slightly, clutching the warm mug tighter between both hands. "I think I should go." Ethan's expression changed immediately. Not angry, not offended, just disappointed in a quiet way that somehow hurt worse. "Because I lied?" he asked softly. "You did not exactly mention you own half of Manhattan." "I do not own half of Manhattan." Olivia raised an eyebrow. "A quarter?" Ethan exhaled through his nose, almost smiling again. "That is not helping my case, is it?" Despite herself, Olivia felt the tension crack slightly, but confusion still twisted inside her chest. She looked around the luxurious apartment. Again, the piano, the marble countertops, the skyline view that probably cost more per month than she made in a year serving tables. None of this made sense beside the man who carried his own groceries upstairs and wore faded hoodies every day. "Why are you living here?" she finally asked. "Should you not be in some giant mansion surrounded by assistants and security guards?" Ethan looked toward the rain-covered windows. His voice lowered. "I needed somewhere nobody would look for me." Silence settled heavily between them. Olivia remembered the headline on his phone. "Missing after boardroom scandal." She swallowed carefully. What happened? Ethan hesitated long enough for her to realize the story hurt. Then he walked toward the cassette player near the couch and pressed play softly. Old music filled the apartment. Fleetwood Mac drifted through the warm room while city lights flickered outside like stars trapped beneath the storm clouds. Ethan leaned against the piano, folding his arms loosely. 3 months ago, my younger brother convinced the board I was becoming a liability. Olivia blinked. "Your brother?" "Daniel." Ethan nodded slowly. "I built Cole Technologies from my apartment when I was 24. Daniel joined later. I trusted him." His jaw tightened slightly. "Big mistake." Olivia stayed quiet, listening carefully. "The company started changing," Ethan continued. "More investors. More pressure. Every quarter became about numbers instead of people. I pushed back. Daniel did not. So he betrayed you." Ethan laughed once under his breath, but there was no humor in it. "Welcome to corporate America." Olivia looked down at her mug. "That is awful." "It is business." "No," she said softly. "It is awful." Ethan looked at her then, really looked at her, like he was surprised someone still separated those two things. Olivia shifted awkwardly beneath his gaze and glanced around for distraction. Her eyes landed on a stack of cassette tapes beside the couch. One label caught her attention immediately. Midnight Voice Notes. Her brows furrowed. "What are those?" Ethan moved too quickly. "Nothing." Olivia narrowed her eyes. "That answer makes it sound very suspicious." Ethan actually laughed this time. Low, warm, dangerous enough to send an unexpected flutter through her chest. "They are embarrassing," he admitted. "Now I definitely want to know." Ethan hesitated before reaching for one of the tapes. He held it carefully between his fingers like it mattered more than it should. "I cannot sleep much anymore," he said quietly. "Some nights I record thoughts instead of letting them stay in my head." Olivia softened immediately. "That is actually kind of sad." "Thank you. I meant sweet." Ethan glanced down at the cassette, thoughtful for a moment. "Most people hear billionaire and assume your life becomes easier. Does it not?" His eyes lifted to hers again. There it was. That loneliness she noticed in the hallway earlier. Deep enough to drown in. "No," he said quietly. "It just becomes harder to know who actually sees you." Olivia felt something shift painfully inside her chest because she understood that feeling more than she wanted to admit. Before she could answer, lightning flashed across the skyline again. The apartment lights flickered once, twice, Then the entire penthouse went dark. The darkness swallowed the penthouse in an instant. Outside, Manhattan disappeared behind sheets of rain, while the steady hum of the city suddenly fell silent. Olivia froze near the kitchen island, gripping her mug tightly as thunder cracked somewhere over the Hudson River. "Please tell me billionaires have backup generators," she whispered into the dark. Ethan's voice came calmly from somewhere near the piano. Usually. Daniel cut access to most of my accounts after the board vote." Olivia blinked slowly, even though he could not see her. "Your brother turned off your electricity?" "Technically, Con Edison did that." A surprised laugh escaped her before she could stop it. Ethan chuckled softly from the darkness, and somehow the sound made the room feel less frightening. A second later, warm candlelight flickered to life near the kitchen. Ethan had lit 2 candles from a drawer somewhere. The soft glow painted golden shadows across his face, making him look less like a billionaire and more like a tired man trying to survive his own life. Olivia watched him quietly as he placed another candle beside her mug. "There," he said, slightly less dramatic. "I do not know," she replied softly. "This actually feels more dramatic." Ethan smiled faintly before moving toward the giant windows overlooking the city. Olivia followed him carefully, the oversized green hoodie slipping lower over her hands. Below them, parts of Manhattan still glittered while other buildings sat completely dark beneath the storm. It looked strange, beautiful and broken at the same time. "New York looks different without power," Olivia whispered. Ethan nodded once. "Honest, maybe." She glanced sideways at him. "You say things like someone who reads poetry at 3 in the morning." "I do." Olivia laughed again, quieter this time. The tension from earlier had started melting away, replaced by something softer. Dangerous in a different way. Ethan leaned one shoulder against the glass while lightning flashed behind him, outlining the sharp edges of his face. "You never answered my question earlier," he said gently. Olivia frowned slightly. "What question? Why were you staying with someone who made you cry in apartment hallways?" Her chest tightened instantly. She looked away toward the dark city below. "Because sometimes loneliness tricks you into accepting things you should not." Ethan stayed silent, waiting. Olivia hated how easy it suddenly felt to talk to him. Maybe because he looked at her like her words mattered. Maybe because he did not interrupt. Maybe because he seemed just as lonely as she was. "His name is Ryan," she admitted quietly. "We met 2 years ago when I moved to New York." She forced a small smile. Classic small-town girl chasing impossible dreams. "What dream?" Ethan asked. Olivia hesitated before answering. "Photography." Ethan looked surprised. "Really?" She nodded toward the old camera hanging from the side of her suitcase near the couch. "That camera belonged to my dad. He taught me how to take pictures before he passed away." Ethan glanced toward the worn vintage camera carefully. "You still use film?" "Only when something feels important enough to keep forever." The words lingered between them for a second too long. Ethan looked back toward the rain-covered skyline. "That is a beautiful way to see the world." Olivia swallowed unexpectedly hard. Nobody had called her beautiful in a very long time. Not her ideas, not her dreams, not the quiet parts of her heart she kept hidden from everyone. Ryan used to laugh whenever she talked about photography. He called it childish. Said nobody paid rent by taking artsy pictures of strangers on subway trains. "I worked double shifts at a diner in Tribeca," Olivia admitted. Photography became more of a side dream. Ethan's expression darkened slightly. "Do not say it like that." "Like what?" "Like your dream deserves to sound smaller because life got difficult." Olivia stared at him. The candlelight flickered softly between them, while old music still played quietly from the cassette player across the room. Fleetwood Mac drifted through the darkness like memory itself. Ethan stepped closer without realizing it. "You know what the worst part of becoming rich is?" he asked softly. Olivia shook her head. "People stop talking about dreams around you. Everything becomes numbers, contracts, strategy. Nobody says what they actually love anymore." Olivia's breath caught slightly at the honesty in his voice. For a moment, neither of them moved. Rain tapped gently against the glass. Candlelight reflected in Ethan's blue eyes while the storm wrapped the penthouse in silence. Then suddenly Olivia's phone vibrated violently inside her pocket. She pulled it out quickly, expecting another message from Ryan. But the second she looked at the screen, her stomach dropped. Over 20 missed calls, 7 voicemails, and 1 new text message that made the blood drain from her face. You left your camera here. If you want it back, come get it yourself. Ethan noticed her expression immediately. His voice lowered carefully. What happened? Olivia stared at the message in horror because the camera was the last thing her father had ever given her before he died. I have to go back. Olivia's voice barely sounded like her own. Her eyes stayed locked on the glowing phone screen while rain continued sliding down the penthouse windows. Behind her, Ethan stepped closer carefully, studying the message over her shoulder without invading her space. His expression darkened immediately. No, he said calmly. Olivia blinked. What? You are not going back there tonight. Ethan, that camera is all I have left of my dad. Her voice cracked softly at the end, humiliating her instantly. She looked away, embarrassed by how quickly tears filled her eyes these days. Ethan noticed anyway. He always noticed. The billionaire who barely spoke somehow paid attention to everything. He reached toward the counter and picked up his phone again. Give me the address. Olivia frowned in confusion. Why? Because I will have someone pick it up. Someone. Ethan glanced at her like he forgot normal people did not have teams of employees waiting around at midnight. Security, he explained quietly. Olivia stared at him for a second before shaking her head. No, absolutely not. You are not sending billionaire security guards to my ex-boyfriend's apartment over a camera. It is not just a camera to you. The simple honesty in his voice made her chest tighten painfully. Ethan slipped his phone back into his pocket when she still did not answer. Fine, he said softly. Then I will go with you. Olivia looked at him like he had completely lost his mind. You? I know how to speak to difficult people. You are wearing sweatpants. Ethan glanced down at himself thoughtfully. Fair point. For the first time all night, Olivia laughed hard enough that she had to cover her mouth. The sound surprised both of them. Ethan smiled automatically at the sight of it, and for a brief second, neither of them looked away. Something warm flickered silently between them before Olivia cleared her throat awkwardly. You really do not have to help me. Ethan's expression softened. Olivia. The way he said her name made her heartbeat stumble unexpectedly. Slow. Careful. Like it mattered. You do not have to handle everything alone anymore. The words hit harder than she expected. Because the truth was, she had been alone for a very long time. Ever since moving to New York. Ever since hospital bills started swallowing every paycheck she made. Ever since her mother got sick back home in Ohio, and Olivia began pretending she was doing better than she actually was. She swallowed hard and looked toward the rain outside. You barely know me. Ethan stayed quiet for a moment before answering. Sometimes you can know someone is hurting without knowing every detail. Silence wrapped around them again. The candlelight danced softly across the marble countertops while old music continued humming through the dark penthouse. Olivia suddenly realized she had completely forgotten about the storm outside. Forgotten about the humiliation in the hallway. Forgotten about Ryan. Somehow this apartment felt safer than anywhere she had been in months. Ethan glanced toward the cassette player again before speaking quietly. Wait here. Olivia watched him disappear down the hallway toward the bedrooms. A minute later, he returned wearing dark jeans and a black wool coat that probably cost more than her monthly rent. His hair was still slightly messy from sleep, which somehow made him look even more unfairly attractive. Olivia immediately looked away before her face betrayed her. Ethan grabbed a set of car keys from the counter. Ready? You are seriously doing this? You said the camera matters. He shrugged lightly. So it matters. The simplicity of his answer left her speechless. 20 minutes later, they stepped into the underground parking garage beneath the building. Olivia stopped walking the second she saw the car waiting near the elevator. Oh my God. Ethan looked back at her. What? That is a vintage Aston Martin. Technically, it is from 2019. Normal people do not say technically before mentioning Aston Martins. Ethan opened the passenger door for her with the faintest smile. Get in, small-town girl. Olivia slid into the leather seat carefully, trying not to stare at the glowing dashboard or the skyline reflecting across the windshield. The car smelled like cedarwood and winter air, just like his hoodie. Ethan started the engine, and soft jazz filled the silence between them. Rain blurred Manhattan into streaks of silver outside the windows as they drove downtown through the sleeping city. Olivia rested her forehead lightly against the glass, exhausted. Can I ask you something? She murmured quietly. Ethan kept his eyes on the road. Depends. Why were you really hiding in Brooklyn? His hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. For a second, she thought he might avoid the question entirely. Then he finally spoke. Because the last person I trusted destroyed my life. Olivia turned toward him slowly. Ethan stared straight ahead at the rain-soaked streets, jaw tight beneath the passing city lights. And I needed to remember who I was before money made everyone around me feel fake. Olivia's chest tightened unexpectedly at the sadness in his voice. Before she could answer, Ethan suddenly slowed the car. Across the street ahead, Ryan's apartment building glowed beneath a flickering street lamp. But Olivia barely noticed the building anymore, because her eyes were locked on the black SUV parked beside the curb. Two men with cameras jumped out the second Ethan's Aston Martin stopped at the light. Drive. Olivia's voice came out barely above a whisper, but the panic inside it was impossible to miss. Across the street, the two photographers lifted their cameras immediately, flashes exploding against the rain-soaked pavement like tiny bursts of lightning. Ethan's expression changed instantly. Cold. Controlled. The version of him the world probably knew far better than she did. He pressed one button on the steering wheel, and the tinted windows darkened automatically. Seatbelt, he said calmly. Olivia fumbled for it with shaking hands while the paparazzi rushed closer to the Aston Martin. One of them pointed directly toward the windshield. That is him, another voice shouted through the rain. Ethan pulled smoothly away from the curb just before another flash lit the street white. Olivia's heart pounded violently as the photographers jumped back onto the sidewalk. How did they find you? She asked breathlessly. Ethan kept his eyes on the road ahead. They never stopped looking. Manhattan blurred around them in silver reflections while jazz still played softly through the speakers, strangely calm compared to the chaos outside. Olivia glanced nervously behind them. Are they following us? Ethan checked the rearview mirror once. 2 cars back. You sound weirdly relaxed about that. You get used to it. Olivia stared at him in disbelief. No normal person gets used to being chased by strangers with cameras. Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. That is because normal people are allowed to disappear when they need to. The sadness underneath his words settled heavily inside the car. Olivia looked down at her hands. She suddenly realized Ethan had probably spent years being watched constantly, judged constantly, followed constantly. No wonder he hid in a quiet Brooklyn apartment wearing hoodies like armor. Another flash appeared behind them. Olivia flinched instinctively. Ethan noticed immediately. Without taking his eyes off the road, he reached toward the center console and pulled out a black baseball cap. Here. Olivia blinked. What? Wear it. Why do billionaires carry emergency disguises? Experience. Despite the situation, she laughed softly before pulling the cap over her hair. Ethan glanced sideways at her for half a second, and something unreadable flickered across his face. You look cute in that. Olivia froze. Heat rushed into her cheeks instantly. Ethan looked equally surprised by his own words. For a second, neither of them spoke. Then he cleared his throat lightly and turned the music down. Sorry. Do not apologize, Olivia said quietly before she could stop herself. Silence filled the car after that. Dangerous silence. The kind that made every glance feel too personal. Rain slid across the windshield while downtown Manhattan glowed ahead like another universe entirely. Finally, Ethan slowed the car near a small 24-hour diner tucked beneath an old brick building in Soho. Neon lights reflected across puddles outside the windows. Why are we stopping? Olivia asked. Because you have not eaten since yesterday afternoon. She frowned. How do you know that? Ethan parked carefully along the curb. You looked at the hot chocolate like it was the first warm thing you had all day. Olivia stared at him quietly, caught off guard by the fact he noticed something that small. Ethan stepped out into the rain before she could answer and hurried around to open her door beneath the glow of the diner's sign. Warm air wrapped around them the second they entered. The smell of coffee and pancakes instantly filled the room. A sleepy waitress behind the counter looked up from her crossword puzzle and nearly dropped her pen when she recognized Ethan. Oh my God, she whispered. Ethan lifted one finger gently toward his lips. The waitress nodded so fast, it almost looked painful. Olivia tried not to smile as they slid into a booth near the back corner. Do people always react like that around you? She asked quietly. Ethan picked up a menu without looking at it. Usually worse. That sounds exhausting. It is. The waitress hurried over nervously. Mr. Cole, I just want to say your interview at Stanford literally changed my life. Ethan smiled politely. Thank you. Olivia watched the interaction carefully. He was kind, genuine, nothing like the ruthless billionaire headlines described online. The waitress left after taking their order, still blushing furiously. Olivia rested her chin lightly against her hand. You know what is weird? Ethan looked up. What? You seem more comfortable talking to diner waitresses at 2 in the morning than billionaires on television. A faint smile touched his mouth again. That is because diner waitresses usually tell the truth. Olivia felt her heartbeat stumble unexpectedly. The rain softened outside while old rock music hummed quietly from the diner's speakers overhead. For the first time in months, she felt warm, safe, seen. Ethan studied her carefully across the booth before speaking again. Can I ask you something now? Olivia nodded slowly. Why did you stay in New York if it has hurt you this much? She looked down at the sugar packets on the table for a long moment before answering honestly. Because leaving would feel like admitting I failed. Ethan's eyes softened immediately. Olivia. The way he said her name again nearly unraveled her. You are still here, he said quietly. That does not sound like failure to me. Olivia looked up into his blue eyes just as the diner television suddenly switched to breaking news. Her breath caught instantly. Every screen inside the restaurant lit up with Ethan's face beside a giant headline. Cole Technologies prepares emergency board vote. Possible criminal investigation against former CEO Ethan Cole. The entire diner went silent. Forks paused halfway to mouths. Coffee cups stopped moving. Every television mounted above the counter repeated the same headline in bright red letters, while reporters talked over one another with urgent voices. Possible criminal investigation against Ethan Cole. Olivia slowly turned toward Ethan across the booth. His face had gone completely unreadable. Calm in the way people become when they are too exhausted to react anymore. On the screen behind him, old footage played from one of his company press conferences. Perfect suit. Sharp smile. Cameras flashing everywhere around him. It looked nothing like the quiet man sitting across from her in a dark wool coat at 2:30 in the morning. Mr. Cole, the waitress whispered nervously from beside the counter. Ethan looked up politely. Can you turn it off, please? She grabbed the remote immediately and muted every television in the diner. Silence rushed back into the room, heavy and awkward. Olivia stared at him carefully. Criminal investigation? Ethan leaned back slowly against the booth. Daniel is trying to force me into coming back publicly. By accusing you of crimes? By letting the media panic investors. He glanced toward the rain outside the windows. Fear moves faster than truth. Olivia studied him quietly. Did you do whatever they are accusing you of? Ethan looked directly into her eyes. No, the answer came instantly. No hesitation. No nervousness. Just honesty. Olivia believed him before her brain even had time to question it. That realization scared her more than it should have. Their pancakes arrived a few seconds later, breaking the tension slightly. The waitress set the plates down carefully, like she was afraid of interrupting something fragile between them. Ethan thanked her softly, while Olivia stared at the food without touching it. Eat, Ethan said gently. You look like you might disappear if the wind picks up. That was almost romantic. It was medically concerning. Olivia smiled despite herself before finally taking a bite. Warm maple syrup melted across the pancakes, and suddenly she realized how starving she actually was. Ethan watched her for a second before quietly pushing his own plate toward her. Take mine too. Olivia laughed softly. You cannot survive on coffee and trauma forever, Ethan. He blinked once, then unexpectedly laughed under his breath. A real laugh this time. Low and warm enough to make nearby customers glance over curiously. Olivia felt ridiculously proud of herself for causing it. Outside, the rain finally began slowing to a soft drizzle. The city looked calmer now, glowing gold beneath the wet streets and neon reflections. Ethan folded his hands together loosely on the table. Tell me something honest, he said quietly. Olivia looked up. About what? About me. She frowned slightly. I barely know you. Exactly. His blue eyes stayed fixed on hers. What was your first impression? Olivia hesitated, suddenly aware of how intimate the question felt. Honestly, Ethan nodded once. She swallowed carefully. I thought you looked lonely before I knew you were rich. Something shifted in his expression immediately. Small, almost invisible, but real. Ethan looked down at the untouched coffee beside his hands. Most people notice the money first. Most people probably do not hear you playing piano through apartment walls at midnight. A faint smile touched his mouth again. You heard that. Every night. That is embarrassing. Actually, Olivia admitted softly. It was kind of comforting. Ethan looked at her slowly then, like her words reached somewhere nobody else ever touched anymore. The air between them suddenly felt warmer than the diner itself. Too warm. Olivia quickly looked away first and focused on cutting another piece of pancake. So, she said awkwardly, what happens now? Ethan's expression darkened slightly. Now Daniel waits for me to panic and return publicly. And will you? He stayed quiet for a long moment. I do not know. Olivia frowned. But it is your company. Was. The single word carried years of exhaustion. Inside it, Olivia studied him carefully beneath the soft diner lights. For someone worth billions of dollars, Ethan Cole looked strangely lost. Like a man who built an empire and somehow still ended up alone inside it. Her chest tightened unexpectedly. Before she could stop herself, she reached across the table and lightly touched his hand. Ethan froze instantly. So did she. The contact lasted maybe 2 seconds. Barely anything. But the second her fingers brushed his skin, something electric moved silently between them. Olivia pulled back quickly, heart racing. Sorry, she whispered. Ethan stared down at the table for a moment before lifting his eyes to hers again. His voice came quieter this time. Rougher somehow. Do not apologize for being kind to me. Her breath caught. Neither of them moved. The rain tapped gently against the windows while old jazz hummed softly through the nearly empty diner. Then suddenly Ethan's phone vibrated hard against the table. His expression changed the second he saw the screen. Olivia immediately noticed. What is it? Ethan answered the call without taking his eyes off her. Yeah. Silence. Then his jaw tightened sharply. How many? Olivia watched the color slowly drain from his face. Whatever he was hearing was bad. Very bad. Ethan stood abruptly from the booth, one hand pressing against the table edge. Lock down the building, he said coldly into the phone. Do not let anyone upstairs until I get back. Olivia's stomach dropped. Ethan ended the call and looked at her with an expression she had never seen before. Fear. They found the penthouse, he said quietly. And apparently, they know about you now. Olivia felt the warmth drain from her body instantly. What do you mean they know about me? Ethan tossed several bills onto the diner table without even looking at the amount. I mean someone leaked your name. His voice had changed again. Colder now. Sharper. The billionaire version of Ethan Cole stepping back into place whether he wanted to or not. Olivia stood quickly as panic tightened in her chest. How is that even possible? Ethan grabbed his coat from the booth beside him. Because the second photographers saw you. With me tonight, people started digging. They hurried toward the diner exit while the waitress watched nervously from behind the counter. Rain still misted lightly across the sidewalks outside, turning the city into silver reflections and blurred headlights. Ethan opened the passenger door for Olivia immediately. Get in. Ethan, what is happening? He waited until she climbed into the car before answering. When people cannot reach me, they go after whoever is closest to me. The words hit harder than she expected. Closest to me. Ethan slid behind the wheel and started the engine while his phone continued vibrating endlessly against the center console. Olivia glanced down at the screen, lighting up every few seconds. Unknown numbers. News outlets. Board members. Daniel. Ethan ignored every call. You should answer somebody, Olivia whispered carefully. Not tonight. He pulled smoothly into traffic, jaw tight beneath the passing streetlights. Olivia watched him quietly for a moment before looking down at her own phone again. More notifications flooded the screen every second now. Her stomach dropped lower with each one. Unknown woman spotted with disgraced billionaire Ethan Cole. Who is the mystery girl? One blurry photo showed her climbing into Ethan's Aston Martin outside the diner. Another captured her inside the restaurant sitting across from him beneath the warm lights. Olivia felt sick. Oh my God. Ethan glanced sideways briefly. Do not read the comments. People already think I am some secret girlfriend. Ethan's hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. You are not responsible for this. I literally met you 3 hours ago. Exactly. Olivia laughed once under her breath, overwhelmed and exhausted. This is insane. Manhattan rushed past outside the windows while soft jazz still played quietly in the background, almost mocking how chaotic everything had suddenly become. Ethan reached over without warning and gently took the phone from her shaking hands. Enough, he said softly. You do not need strangers deciding who you are tonight. Olivia stared at him. The protective calm in his voice made her chest ache unexpectedly. Nobody had defended her like that in a very long time. Ethan tossed the phone carefully onto the back seat before slowing at a red light. Rain glowed gold beneath the traffic signals around them. Listen to me, he said quietly. Olivia looked over. Whatever happens next, none of this is your fault. Her throat tightened. That sounds like something people say right before life gets worse. Ethan almost smiled, but exhaustion pulled it away before it fully appeared. Probably. Silence settled again. But this silence felt different now. Heavier. More intimate somehow. Olivia studied his face beneath the dashboard lights. The expensive coat. The tired eyes. The loneliness he carried like it had become part of his bones. She suddenly realized Ethan had probably not slept peacefully in months. Maybe years. You know, she said softly. For someone worth billions of dollars, you look unbelievably stressed. Ethan laughed quietly through his nose. That might be the nicest thing anyone has said to me this week. Olivia smiled faintly. Then her expression slowly faded as another thought hit her. Wait. Ethan glanced at her. What? If photographers followed us tonight, her voice trailed off. Ethan immediately understood. Ryan. Olivia nodded slowly, dread curling inside her stomach. Ethan cursed quietly under his breath and pressed harder on the accelerator. Do you think he would talk to reporters? Olivia stared out the rain-covered window. He likes attention too much not to. Ethan's jaw tightened again. The Aston Martin moved faster through the wet Manhattan streets while midnight blurred around them in streaks of light and shadow. Finally, the massive glass tower of Ethan's building appeared ahead. But the second Olivia saw it, her heart nearly stopped. At least 20 photographers crowded the entrance behind metal barricades. Camera flashes exploded constantly against the black SUVs parked outside. Security guards blocked the doors while reporters shouted questions toward anyone entering the building. Oh my God, Olivia whispered. Ethan slowed the car carefully half a block away, eyes narrowing at the scene. That is more media than I expected. More? Olivia turned toward him in disbelief. There are enough cameras out there to film a superhero movie. Ethan rubbed one hand over his jaw, thinking quickly. Then suddenly he looked at her. Really looked at her. There is another way inside. Olivia frowned nervously. Okay. But if we use it, Ethan said quietly, there is a chance people will assume you are staying with me. The words hung heavily inside the car. Olivia's heartbeat stumbled. Ethan watched her carefully, blue eyes softer now despite the chaos waiting outside. I will understand if you want to walk away from this, he said gently. But if you come upstairs tonight, his voice lowered slightly. Everything changes after that. Olivia stared through the windshield at the swarm of flashing cameras outside Ethan's building. Reporters crowded the sidewalk beneath umbrellas, while security guards struggled to hold the barricades steady. The entire entrance looked like a movie premiere mixed with a public execution. Her chest tightened painfully. I cannot do this, she whispered. Ethan stayed quiet beside her, giving her space to breathe. That somehow made it worse. Because he was not pressuring her. He was giving her a choice. Something nobody had done for her in a very long time. Olivia looked down at her trembling hands. 12 hours ago, her biggest problem was overdue rent and a broken relationship. Now strangers online were calling her the billionaire's mystery woman, while news stations accused Ethan of criminal investigations. None of this felt real. If I leave, she said slowly, those people will still follow me, right? Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. Probably. And if I go upstairs with you? He glanced toward the flashing cameras outside before answering honestly. Tomorrow, every gossip site in America will assume we are together. Olivia let out a weak laugh, filled with disbelief. This is officially the weirdest night of my life. Ethan looked at her then. Tired blue eyes. Rainwater reflecting softly across his face from the windshield lights. Mine too. The answer surprised her enough to smile. Just a little. Ethan reached toward the center console and pressed a button. The navigation screen shifted, revealing a hidden parking route beneath the building blueprint. There is a private service entrance under the tower, he explained quietly. No cameras. No reporters. Olivia blinked. You have secret billionaire tunnels. I told you. Experience. Another laugh escaped her before she could stop it. Ethan looked relieved hearing the sound, like he had been carrying tension in his chest ever since the diner. Olivia noticed small things about him now. The way he flexed his hand against the steering wheel when stressed. The way exhaustion settled into his eyes whenever he thought nobody noticed. The way he always watched her carefully before speaking, like he wanted to make sure his words never hurt her. Nobody had treated her gently in a very long time. Ethan turned off the main road and guided the Aston Martin down a narrow underground ramp hidden beside the building. The noise of reporters faded behind them until only silence and the soft engine remained. Olivia stared out the window at the private elevator garage below the tower. Sleek black SUVs lined the walls beside security stations glowing with blue monitors. "This feels illegal," she murmured. "Technically, it is just expensive." Ethan parked smoothly near a private elevator marked restricted access. The second the engine stopped, silence wrapped around them again. Heavy this time. Personal. Olivia suddenly realized going upstairs with Ethan meant stepping fully into his world, into the chaos surrounding him, into headlines and cameras and billionaire problems she could barely understand. But somehow, the thought of leaving him alone tonight felt worse. Ethan rested both hands loosely on the steering wheel, staring ahead instead of at her. "You should know something before we go upstairs." Olivia swallowed carefully. "Okay." His voice lowered slightly. "The second people realize I care about someone, they use it against me." Her heartbeat stumbled at the word care. Ethan finally looked over at her. Honest. Vulnerable in a way she doubted many people ever saw. "And right now," he admitted quietly, "you are standing dangerously close to becoming important to me." Olivia forgot how to breathe for a second. Rainwater dripped softly somewhere in the underground garage, while distant elevator music echoed faintly through the silence. Ethan looked like he regretted saying it out loud the moment the words left him. He glanced away first, jaw tight. "Sorry," he muttered quietly. "Long night." But Olivia knew he meant it. That was the terrifying part. She slowly reached for the handle of the oversized green hoodie still wrapped around her shoulders. His hoodie, warm from carrying his scent all night. Coffee, cedarwood, winter air. "Ethan," she whispered softly. He looked back at her immediately. Olivia's chest tightened painfully because she had known him less than a day. Yet somehow he already felt safer than people she had loved for years. "I think," she admitted carefully, "you became important to me too." Silence crashed between them. Ethan stared at her like the words physically hit him somewhere deep. Neither of them moved. The world outside disappeared completely for one suspended moment inside the dark car. Then suddenly Ethan's phone exploded with notifications again. The screen lit up violently across the dashboard. Olivia glanced down automatically, and her stomach dropped. A new article had just gone live. Exclusive. Ethan Cole's secret girlfriend identified as Brooklyn waitress Olivia Parker. Beneath the headline sat a large photo of Olivia standing outside her apartment building earlier that evening. But it was not the photo that terrified her. It was the smaller image beside it. Ryan, smiling directly into the camera during an interview. And underneath his picture, one quote appeared in bold letters across the screen. "Trust me," Ryan told reporters. "Ethan Cole has no idea who Olivia Parker really is." Olivia felt her stomach twist, so hard she thought she might actually be sick. The glowing article reflected across the Aston Martin dashboard, while Ryan's smiling face stared back at her from the screen like a nightmare refusing to end. Ethan read the headline once. Then again. His expression became terrifyingly calm. "What does he mean by that?" he asked quietly. Olivia looked away immediately. "Nothing." Ethan did not move. "Olivia." The softness in his voice somehow made lying impossible. She swallowed hard and pressed both hands against her knees to stop them from shaking. "Ryan likes attention," she whispered. "He is probably making things up for reporters." Ethan stayed silent for a moment too long. That was not an answer. Olivia closed her eyes briefly. Exhaustion crashed over her all at once. The cameras, the headlines, the rain. "Ethan." Everything felt too heavy now. "Before I moved to New York," she admitted quietly, "my dad borrowed money from investors to save our family auto shop in Ohio." Ethan listened carefully without interrupting. "The business still failed after he got sick. We lost everything." Her voice cracked slightly. "After he died, debt collectors kept calling my mother every day." Ethan's expression softened instantly. "Olivia, I came to New York because I thought if I worked hard enough, maybe I could fix things for her someday." She laughed weakly through the emotion building in her throat. Instead, I became a waitress sharing a tiny apartment with a man who made me feel small every time I talked about my dreams. Ethan looked down briefly, jaw tightening. That still does not explain Ryan's interview. Olivia hesitated. This was the part she hated most. The secret she rarely admitted out loud because it made her feel pathetic. A year ago, she whispered carefully, Ryan convinced me to let him manage my photography account online. Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly. What kind of account? I post street photography sometimes. The subway photos? Olivia blinked in surprise. You saw those? I follow the account. Her breath caught instantly. Wait, you know my photography page? Ethan suddenly looked almost embarrassed. I did not know it was yours at first. Olivia stared at him in disbelief. You follow Olivia in Focus? Ethan rubbed the back of his neck once. Your photos make New York look honest. Her entire heart seemed to stop for one impossible second. That tiny photography account meant everything to her. She posted there at night after work when the loneliness got too loud. Black and white subway portraits. Rainy sidewalks. Strangers holding coffee cups beneath. Streetlights. Tiny human moments nobody else noticed. The idea that Ethan had quietly followed her work before even meeting her felt unreal. Ryan had access to the account passwords, she said softly after a moment. He used to answer messages pretending to be me. Ethan's expression darkened immediately. Including business offers? Olivia nodded slowly. A few galleries reached out before. Ryan told them I was not interested because he thought photography was a waste of time. Silence filled the underground garage. Ethan stared at her with something dangerously close to anger burning beneath his calm expression. Not at her. At what had been taken from her. He sabotaged your career, Ethan said quietly. Olivia looked down at her hands. I guess. Ethan leaned back slowly against the leather seat, processing everything. That is what Ryan meant in the article, he realized. He thinks he still controls your story. Olivia laughed bitterly. He always liked feeling important. Ethan's blue eyes lifted back to hers. Cold now in a way she had not seen before. Controlled billionaire calm. That ends tonight. Olivia blinked. Ethan. No, his voice stayed quiet but firm. Nobody gets to decide your worth except you. The words hit so deeply she almost could not breathe. Ethan reached toward the back seat and grabbed her phone before handing it to her carefully. Open your photography page. Olivia frowned in confusion but obeyed. The second the account loaded, her eyes widened. Wait. Overnight her follower count had exploded. Thousands of new notifications flooded the screen every second. Comments. Shares. Messages from photography blogs. Major art pages reposting her subway portraits. Olivia stared in shock. What is happening? Ethan looked oddly unsurprised. The diner photos leaked. What? People found your account because reporters linked your name. Olivia scrolled frantically through the page. Her black and white city photos filled the screen while comments poured in underneath them. Whoever took these is incredible. This feels like old New York. Her work is beautiful. Tears burned unexpectedly in Olivia's eyes. For years, she had hidden those photos from the world because Ryan convinced her nobody would care. Ethan watched her silently before speaking softer this time. I cared. Olivia looked up slowly. The underground garage suddenly felt very small around them. Very quiet. Ethan's expression gentled when he noticed the tears in her eyes. Hey, he murmured carefully. Do not cry. Olivia laughed shakily. I hate that you keep seeing me emotional. I do not. His answer came instantly, honest enough to steal the air from her lungs. Neither of them moved. The tension between them shifted again. Softer now. Warmer. Dangerous in an entirely different way. Then suddenly the private elevator beside the car dinged loudly. Both of them looked up at the same time as the doors slowly slid open across the garage. A tall man stepped out wearing an expensive navy suit, rain still dripping from his coat. Dark hair. Familiar blue eyes. Ethan went completely still beside her. Olivia looked back and forth between them in confusion as the stranger smiled coldly toward the Aston Martin. Well, the man said calmly into the silence. This explains why you disappeared, brother.